The moment I saw my mother collapse onto the curb, still clutching her passport, I knew something worse than jet lag had happened. My father stood frozen in the middle of the street, face drained of color as he stared at our family home, or what used to be our family home, while strangers peered nervously through the curtains of the bay window where I'd spent countless childhood afternoons reading. They called the police on us, Olivia. Mom choked out when I reached them, my car barely in park. Our own home, and they called the police on us. I hadn't bothered changing out of my pajama pants when Mom called in hysterics at 6:37 a.m. I just grabbed my keys and driven straight over, certain there had been some bizarre misunderstanding. My parents had just returned from their 40th anniversary trip to Europe, 3 weeks exploring the countries they'd dreamed of visiting since before I was born. They should have been sorting through souvenirs and fighting off jet lag, not sitting on the sidewalk like homeless people. What's happening? Who are those people? I demanded, helping Mom to her feet. Her entire body trembled against mine. Dad turned to me, eyes vacant with shock. Your brother sold our house while we were gone. His voice broke. He forged a power of attorney and sold it right out from under us. The words hit me like a physical blow. Nathan. Of course it was Nathan. My charming, manipulative disaster of a younger brother who had been draining our parents dry for years. But this was unimaginable, even for him. A police cruiser sat in our driveway, lights off but clearly present as a warning. The officers stood on the porch, talking to a young couple who kept gesturing frantically toward my parents. The woman was visibly pregnant. This can't be legal, I said, already mentally cataloging the laws that must have been broken. I wasn't a real estate attorney, but as a public defender, I knew enough about fraud to recognize it. They can't just. They showed us the paperwork, Mom whispered. It has our signatures on it, Olivia. Perfect forgeries. The deed has been transferred. They've been living here for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Nathan had timed it perfectly. He knew exactly how long our parents would be away, knew they wouldn't check their rarely used email while traveling, knew their cell service would be spotty at best in rural Italy and Greece. The officer approached us, hands resting cautiously on his belt. Miss Chen? I'm Officer Rollins. Can we talk? I straightened, shifting into the professional mode that had gotten me through countless confrontations in courtrooms. My name is Olivia Chen. I'm an attorney, and these are my parents, Daniel and Margaret Chen. Their son, my brother, has apparently committed fraud by forging documents to sell their home without consent. I'd like to file a police report immediately. Officer Rollins sighed, looking genuinely sympathetic. It's not that simple, ma'am. The buyers have documentation showing your parents granted power of attorney to their son. The sale appears legitimate on paper. It's fraud, I insisted. My parents never gave him power of attorney. Then we're looking at a criminal investigation, he said. I've already called for a detective. But for now. He glanced uncomfortably at the house. For now, the property legally belongs to the Reynolds family. They purchased it in good faith. So my parents are just supposed to be homeless? My voice rose, drawing the attention of neighbors who had begun to gather on their porches, watching the drama unfold. I can recommend temporary accommodations. They'll stay with me, I cut him off. No way were my parents going to a shelter because of Nathan's betrayal. When will the detective arrive? Within the hour. I suggest you meet them at the station. I helped my shell-shocked parents back to my car, acutely aware of the onlookers and the Reynolds couple still hovering anxiously by the front door, our front door. Mom couldn't stop staring at the house, tears streaming silently down her face. Dad just looked broken, suddenly every one of his 68 years. I should have known, he murmured as I pulled away from the curb. When he called asking about our itinerary, wanting exact dates. The guilt in his voice made my blood boil. Nathan had always been able to manipulate our parents, especially Dad, who blamed himself for every one of Nathan's failures. A childhood diagnosis of ADHD had become Nathan's perpetual excuse for bad behavior well into adulthood. One bad decision had spiraled into another, dropping out of college, a series of failed businesses, gambling debts, and eventually, substance abuse that led to multiple rehab stays, all funded by our parents. And how had he repaid them? By stealing their home out from under them. This isn't your fault, I said firmly, though I knew Dad wouldn't believe me. He never did when it came to Nathan. At my cramped one-bedroom apartment, I settled Mom on my bed with a mild sedative from her travel kit. Dad sat motionless at my kitchen table, staring into a cup of untouched coffee. I need to go to the police station, I told him, already gathering my files and laptop. My work as a public defender meant I had contacts in law enforcement who might help expedite things. Will you be okay with Mom? He nodded vaguely. Where would he go, live? With that kind of money? The house had been worth at least $750,000. Even if Nathan had sold it under market value for a quick sale, he'd have walked away with a small fortune. I don't know, I admitted. But I'm going to find out. At the station, Detective Rivera was waiting for me. We'd worked opposite sides of several cases, and while she was thorough to a fault, she'd always been fair. Olivia, she greeted me, her expression grim. I wish we were meeting under better circumstances. I need to find my brother, I said, skipping the pleasantries. This is a clear case of fraud and identity theft. It certainly appears that way. She motioned me into a small conference room where the Reynolds couple was already waiting, looking as distraught as my parents. Jessica Reynolds protectively cradled her pregnant belly. Her husband, Ben, stood as we entered, his face a mask of anxiety. We didn't know, he began immediately. You have to believe we had no idea the documents were forged. We went through a reputable real estate agent. We did everything by the book. Detective Rivera gestured for him to sit. No one is accusing you of anything, Mr. Reynolds. We're trying to establish a timeline. I forced myself to tamper down my instinctive anger toward these people who were living in my childhood home. If what they said was true, they were victims too. When did you first meet with my brother? I asked. About 6 weeks ago, Jessica replied. He reached out through our real estate agent, saying his parents were looking to sell quickly because they were moving abroad after their vacation. He said they'd given him power of attorney to handle the sale. Did you ever speak directly with my parents? Jessica shook her head. Just emails. He said they were already traveling, preparing for their move. She hesitated. The emails came from their accounts, though. Of course. Nathan would have created fake email addresses that looked legitimate. How much did you pay for the house? Detective Rivera asked. $600,000, Ben answered. It was below market value, but not suspiciously so. He said his parents were motivated sellers who wanted to avoid the hassle of showing the house. I bit back a curse. Nathan had practically given away our family home, a historic Victorian in a desirable neighborhood that had been in our family for 2 generations. We put everything we had into this, Jessica added, her voice breaking. We sold our condo, emptied our savings. My parents contributed to the down payment as a gift for their first grandchild. She gestured to her belly. Detective Rivera made notes as they recounted the details of the transaction. The picture that emerged was one of meticulous planning on Nathan's part. He'd created a paper trail that would withstand casual scrutiny. He'd timed everything perfectly, closing the sale just after our parents left for Europe and ensuring the funds were transferred to an account only he could access. The money didn't go to your parents' accounts? I asked, already knowing the answer. Ben shook his head. He provided wiring instructions for what he called their investment account. Said it was part of their retirement planning. My heart sank. Nathan had covered his tracks well. The money was probably already gone, gambled away, or used to pay off his numerous debts. After the Reynolds left, promising to cooperate fully with the investigation, Detective Rivera turned to me. Your brother was thorough. This wasn't impulsive, he planned this for months. He's never shown this kind of competence before, I admitted. Usually his schemes fall apart immediately. He must have been desperate. Do you have any idea where he might go with this kind of money? I thought about it. Nathan's always talked about living the high life, luxury cars, upscale restaurants. He wouldn't go far, at least not yet. He'd want to enjoy his newfound wealth where people could see him. We'll put out an APB and freeze any accounts we can find in his name, but if he's been planning this for months, he'll have moved the money, I finished. Can you check local high-end rentals? Particularly around Lakeside. Nathan had always been obsessed with the exclusive resort community an hour outside the city. While Detective Rivera made calls, I stepped outside to check on my parents. Dad answered Mom's phone, his voice hollow. "She's still sleeping," he said when I asked. "Any news?" "Not yet. The police are looking for Nathan. I'm going to do some searching of my own." "Your mother keeps asking if it's all a bad dream," Dad said, his voice breaking. 40 years in that house, Olivia. All our memories. "I know, Dad. I'm going to fix this." I wasn't sure how, but I had to try. After hanging up, I sat in my car, thinking about where Nathan might go to flaunt his new wealth. He'd always been predictable in his vanity. If he'd stolen over $500,000, he'd be spending it conspicuously. I started driving toward Lakeside, remembering that Nathan had dated a woman who worked at the resort's main restaurant last year. Amber something. It was a long shot, but worth checking. The upscale restaurant wasn't open for lunch yet, but I caught the manager as he was coming in. "Amber Sullivan?" "Sure, she still works here," he confirmed when I asked. "But she's taken some time off." Said her boyfriend was treating her to a luxury rental at Blue Heron. My pulse quickened. This boyfriend, tall Asian man, designer clothes, flashy? The manager nodded. "That's him. Been throwing money around like crazy the past couple weeks. Left a $1,000 tip after dinner last weekend." Of course he had. Nathan had always equated spending with status. The Blue Heron complex wasn't hard to find, a collection of ultramodern lakefront properties with private boat slips. As I drove slowly past, I spotted it immediately, a brand new speedboat docked at Unit 7, living the dream emblazoned on its hull. I parked and approached cautiously. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see an expensively furnished interior, but no movement. I was debating whether to call Detective Rivera when a black BMW convertible pulled into the driveway. Nathan stepped out, looking like he'd walked off the pages of a luxury lifestyle magazine, designer sunglasses, crisp linen shirt, an ostentatious watch glinting on his wrist. He was carrying bags from high-end stores and whistling. He froze when he saw me. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then, incredibly, he smiled, that charming, disarming smile that had gotten him out of trouble so many times before. "Olivia." What a surprise. He walked toward me as if this were a normal family visit. "How did you find me?" The casual greeting, as if he hadn't just devastated our family, unleashed something primal in me. I closed the distance between us in seconds, shoving him hard enough that he dropped his shopping bags. "How could you?" I hissed, my voice shaking with rage. "Your own parents, Nathan. They're destroyed." His smile faltered, but only slightly. "Let's talk inside, shall we? The neighbors here value their privacy. Just like you valued Mom and Dad's home? Their memories? Everything they worked for?" He sighed, collecting his bags. "It's complicated, Liv. Let me explain." I followed him inside, seething. The townhouse was even more extravagant than it appeared from outside, all white furniture and chrome fixtures, with a stunning view of the lake. Evidence of his spending spree was everywhere. A massive TV, high-end stereo equipment, designer clothes still with tags hanging on a rack by the door. "Nice place," I said coldly. "Enjoying spending Mom and Dad's money?" He set his bags down carefully. "It's not like that. I'm investing it. I'm going to pay them back double." I laughed, the sound harsh and humorless. "With what? Your hedge fund? Your crypto expertise? Or is it sports betting this time?" His expression darkened. "I have connections now. I'm not the screw-up you all think I am." "Really? Because from where I'm standing, selling your parents' home while they're on vacation seems like a pretty massive screw-up." "They weren't using it," he said, maddeningly calm. "They've been talking about downsizing for years. So you thought you'd make that decision for them? By committing fraud?" I prefer to think of it as being proactive. That money was just sitting there in real estate equity, doing nothing. I stared at him, unable to comprehend the depth of his self-deception. "They came home this morning, Nathan. They stood on the sidewalk with their suitcases, locked out of their own home. Mom had to take a sedative. Dad looks like he's aged 10 years in a day." For the first time, something like doubt flickered across his face. They weren't supposed to be back until next week. Dad got food poisoning in Athens. They cut the trip short. I stepped closer to him. What exactly was your plan? They'd never notice you sold their house. He ran a hand through his carefully styled hair, a nervous gesture from childhood that betrayed his confident facade. I was going to tell them after I'd multiplied the investment. Bought them an even better place. The police are looking for you, I said. Detective Rivera is building a case. This is serious, Nathan, federal charges. Years in prison. A flicker of fear crossed his face before he masked it with bravado. They have to catch me first. They already have. I've told them exactly where you are. His expression hardened. No, you haven't. You wouldn't do that to your own brother. You did worse to your own parents. We stared at each other at an impasse. A woman's voice called from upstairs. Nate? Who are you talking to? Amber appeared on the spiral staircase, wearing a silk robe, her blonde hair tumbling over her shoulders. She paused when she saw me. Oh! Hi. This is my sister, Nathan said smoothly. Just paying a surprise visit. Amber smiled uncertainly. That's nice. Will you be staying for dinner? We're having lobster. The casual domesticity of it all, the groceries, the dinner plans, the luxury of their stolen life, made my stomach turn. No, I said. I won't be staying. Neither will Nathan. Her smile faltered. What do you mean? I mean he's coming with me to the police station to confess to stealing and selling our parents' house. Nathan's laugh was forced. She's joking. Olivia has a weird sense of humor. I'm not joking. I pulled out my phone. I'm calling Detective Rivera right now to tell her exactly where to find you. His expression darkened. Don't. Amber looked between us, confusion giving way to suspicion. Nate? What is she talking about? Nothing, he said quickly. Just a family disagreement. He sold our parents' home without their knowledge or permission, I told her. Using forged documents. The money he's been spending, the boat, this place, whatever he's bought you, it's all stolen. Amber's face went pale. Is that true? Of course not, Nathan snapped. She's always been jealous of me. Always trying to turn people against me. But Amber was backing away from him. The house you showed me, you said it was your parents' vacation home. That they were letting you manage the sale. It was more complicated than that, he hedged. Oh my God. Her hand flew to her mouth. I told my parents I was dating this successful investment manager. I borrowed money from them for this place. Nathan's expression turned ugly. Calm down. You're overreacting. Overreacting, she repeated, her voice rising. I could be implicated in fraud. Only if you make a scene, he hissed, grabbing her arm. If you'd just listen. I stepped between them. Let her go, Nathan. He released her, but his eyes were dangerous. This is between me and her. Stay out of it. Amber was already rushing upstairs, presumably to get dressed and get away from him. I heard drawers opening and closing frantically. It's over, Nathan, I said quietly. The best thing you can do now is come with me voluntarily. Return whatever money is left. Try to make this right. He laughed, a hollow sound. Make it right? There's no making this right. You know that better than anyone. One mistake and I'm the family disappointment all over again. This wasn't a mistake. This was a deliberate, calculated crime against the people who have bailed you out countless times. The people who never gave up on you, even when they should have. Save the lecture, he snarled. I'm not going anywhere with you. Amber reappeared, fully dressed now and clutching a suitcase. She threw a set of keys on the counter. I'm out. Don't call me. Don't text me. If the police contact me, I'll tell them everything I know. Nathan lunged for her, but I blocked his path. Let her go. She fled out the door without a backward glance. We heard her car start and speed away. Nathan stared after her, then turned on me, fury blazing in his eyes. Look what you did. You ruined everything. You ruined everything when you decided to steal from our parents. He paced the living room like a caged animal. You have no idea what it's like to be me. Always in your shadow. Perfect Olivia with her law degree and her respectable job. Mom and Dad's pride and joy. That's not true, and you know it. They've supported you through everything: rehab, job losses, legal troubles. They never gave up on you. They gave up on me a long time ago, he spat. They just kept paying because it was easier than admitting they'd failed with me. The bitterness in his voice was so raw, it almost made me feel sorry for him. Almost. Nathan, please. Come with me now. We'll talk to Detective Rivera together. I'll help you find a good lawyer. For a moment, I thought I was getting through to him. His shoulders slumped, and he looked around the lavish townhouse as if seeing it for what it really was, a monument to his betrayal. Then his phone pinged. He glanced at it, and something changed in his expression. I can't go to prison, Liv. You should have thought of that before you committed fraud. No, you don't understand. His voice was urgent now. I owe people. Dangerous people. A chill ran through me. What are you talking about? Why do you think I needed the money so badly? These investors I told you about, they fronted me cash months ago. I lost it all. They've been threatening me. So this wasn't even about some get-rich-quick scheme? It was about paying off gambling debts? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. All the more reason to go to the police, I said. They can protect you. Nathan laughed bitterly. No one can protect me from these people. Then tell me who they are. Let me help you. The only way you can help me is by walking out that door and forgetting you found me. Give me time to pay these guys off and get out of the country. I shook my head. I can't do that. Mom and Dad deserve better. Then you're signing my death warrant. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling a cab. You need to leave. I'm not going anywhere without you. His expression hardened. Yes, you are. Before I could react, he shoved me hard. I stumbled backward, caught off guard by the sudden violence from my own brother. My foot caught on the edge of an expensive rug, and I fell, hitting my head on the corner of a glass coffee table. Pain exploded behind my eyes. When my vision cleared, Nathan was standing over me, looking horrified. Liv, I'm sorry. I didn't mean. Get away from me, I gasped, touching my temple. My fingers came away bloody. Let me help you up, he said, reaching for me. I slapped his hand away. Don't touch me. A siren wailed in the distance, growing closer. Nathan's head whipped toward the sound, panic flooding his face. Did you call them? Did you tell them where I am? No, I said, struggling to my feet. But Amber probably did. The siren grew louder. Nathan ran to the window, then to the back door that led to the deck and boat slip. I have to go, he said, grabbing a backpack from the counter. I'm sorry, Liv. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. You hurt everyone, I said, steadying myself against the wall. That's what you do. He paused at the door, looking back at me with what seemed like genuine regret. Tell Mom and Dad. Tell them I'm sorry. Then he was gone, racing down to the boat. I heard the engine sputter to life as police cars pulled into the driveway. I staggered to the door just in time to see Nathan's boat speeding across the lake, leaving a white wake behind it. Detective Rivera burst onto the deck beside me, her gun drawn. Where is he? She demanded. I pointed to the rapidly disappearing boat. He's running. She lowered her weapon, cursing. Are you all right? You're bleeding. I'm fine, I said, though my head was pounding. Just a cut. Within minutes, the townhouse was swarming with police. I gave a statement while a paramedic cleaned the gash on my temple. It wasn't deep enough for stitches, but it would leave a bruise. A physical reminder of Nathan's betrayal. We've contacted the marina on the other side of the lake, Detective Rivera told me. If he docks there, we'll get him. In the meantime, we're processing this place for evidence. It looks like he left in a hurry. There's a safe in the bedroom that's still open. Money, passports, documents. Passports? I asked, suddenly alert. Several. All with his photo, different names. Of course. Nathan had been planning his escape since the beginning. And the money? I asked. From the house? Most of it's gone, she said grimly. But we found about $100,000 in cash in the safe. It's not much against the value of the house, but it's something. It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough to make up for what my parents had lost. But it was a start. As the sun began to set over the lake, I called my parents. Dad answered immediately. We got him, I said, not bothering with preliminaries. Well, almost. He ran, but the police recovered some of the money. Dad was silent for a long moment. Is he okay? The question broke my heart. Even now, after everything, Dad's first concern was for Nathan. He's alive, I said. But he's in trouble, Dad. Serious trouble. I know, he sighed. Your mother's awake. We should tell her together. I promised to be home soon and hung up, watching as police officers carried evidence boxes from the townhouse. Nathan's stolen life, packed up and cataloged. Detective Rivera approached me again. We found documentation of transactions. He was laundering money through offshore accounts. This goes deeper than just the house sale. I wasn't surprised. Nathan had always been involved in something, each scheme more desperate than the last. We also found this, she said, holding up a thin folder. It looks like he was planning to target your parents' retirement accounts next. He had all the documentation ready, account numbers, passwords, everything. The revelation made me feel physically ill. If we hadn't caught him now, how much more damage would he have done? I want to press charges, I said firmly. No matter what my parents say. She nodded. It's not up to them anymore. This is federal wire fraud now. When we catch him, he's looking at serious time. When, not if. I had to believe that. As I drove back to my apartment, exhaustion washing over me, I thought about the long road ahead. The legal battles to reclaim my parents' home. The criminal proceedings against Nathan. The painful family fractures that might never heal. But for the first time that day, I felt a glimmer of hope. We'd stopped Nathan before he could do even more damage. We'd recovered at least some of the money. And most importantly, I'd stood up to him, finally refusing to enable the destruction he'd been causing our family for years. The sun had fully set by the time I reached my apartment building. Mom and Dad were waiting at the kitchen table, holding hands, looking older and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen them. He got away for now, I told them, sitting down heavily. But the police are tracking him. And they found some of the money. How much? Dad asked. About 100,000. Mom's shoulders slumped. Out of 600,000. Our home. Her voice trailed off. We're going to fight for it, I promised. The sale was fraudulent. We have a case. It could take years, Dad said. And those poor young people who bought it, they're victims too. That was my father, still thinking of others even in his own crisis. We have options, I insisted. You can stay with me as long as needed. We'll figure this out together. Mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. We know, sweetheart. And we're so grateful for you. The simple statement brought unexpected tears to my eyes. My whole life, I'd been the responsible one, the one who followed the rules, while Nathan grabbed all the attention with his dramas and disasters. Sometimes I'd wondered if my parents even noticed my efforts, overshadowed as they were by Nathan's constant needs. I just wish. Mom began, then stopped, blinking back tears. I wish I understood why. Where did we go wrong with him? You didn't, I said firmly. Nathan makes his own choices. He always has. Dad nodded slowly. Maybe it's time we accepted that. It was the closest I'd ever heard him come to giving up on Nathan, and while it broke my heart, I also felt a profound relief. Perhaps this final betrayal would free them from the cycle of blame and guilt they'd been trapped in for decades. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Rivera. Coast Guard spotted the boat abandoned at the North Shore. K, 9 units on scene. We'll find him. I showed it to my parents. What happens when they catch him? Mom asked. He goes to jail, I said gently. For a long time, she closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. Our son. In prison. It's where he belongs, Dad said, surprising me with his firmness. He needs to face consequences, finally. Mom looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. You're right. She turned to me. Both of you are right. We've enabled him for too long. I wrapped them both in a tight hug, my heart aching for all we'd lost, but also strangely peaceful. The worst had happened, the thing my parents had feared for years. Their son had betrayed them completely. And yet here we were, still standing, still a family. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Rivera, in custody. I showed my parents without comment. Dad's hand tightened on mine, but his expression was resolute. "Now we rebuild," he said simply. I nodded, looking at these two people who had given me everything: their love, their values, their strength. Nathan had taken their house, but he hadn't broken their spirit. And he hadn't broken our family, not the parts that mattered. Together, I promised. We rebuild together. Outside, night had fallen completely, but through my apartment window, I could see stars beginning to appear in the clear sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, legal battles, financial stress, emotional wounds to heal. But tonight, in this moment, we had each other. And that was enough to start with.